We're back. Discipline to Win, episode 52. Today we have Matt Spettel in the studio with us. Nick and I are excited to get into his entire story of founding Trainwell. Matt has been featured alongside some very prominent athletes in Forbes 30 under 30 on the sports list. Some very proud names to have himself up there with. So we're excited to hear about his story, his journey, and his mission on helping people gain access to fitness nationally and as many people probably globally as he can. So Matt, welcome to the studio and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. And yeah, I'm not know if we'll quite be at the athletic level of some of those more greats, but hey, we'll try our best as fitness enthusiasts here to keep up. So I'm excited to nerd out about fitness.
That's right. Awesome. Well, just getting right to it. Talk to us. A lot of people have big ideas, and so many people have ideas, and people go their whole lives and say, I had this idea I should have done, or I could have done, or I could have implemented. When did your idea for Trainwell start, and when did you immediately take action on turning it into a reality?
Yeah, and I'll actually probably rewind a bit before the actual idea to touch on when I got into fitness, because that was a key precursor to even having the idea in the first place. But growing up, I was probably the nerdiest person you could possibly imagine, really never left my computer desk, was making my own video games, all of that, but never did any kind of sports. So very funny, we'd end up on the sports list. It was actually in high school, my then best friend, now co-founder, Gabe, drug me out of that computer chair, brought me into the gym for the first time, kicked my butt in everything. I was very competitive. And so I said, all right, I can do this. I can go work out. I can keep up with him. It would take years to catch up, but I worked really hard and that became a huge part of my life. So going into college, I had a bit of an itch to do my own thing and build my own company. I wasn't quite sure what yet. I was dabbling in a bunch of different ideas and projects. And then I had this very just personal life passion of fitness that I hadn't quite connected the dots yet. So fast forward till it was about my junior year in college, going into my junior year, I was having the classic junior year existential crisis of what do I want to do with my life? All my friends are getting Google internships. Oh my God, those are crazy numbers. Like, oh, am I messing up? Like, should I be doing that? And so I kind of said to myself, like, if I'm going to do this whole entrepreneur thing, I've got to come up with an idea now. I've got to jump on something. And that's when I started brainstorming. Here's all my passions. Here's kind of the trends I'm seeing in markets. Here's the things that I could build with the skills I have. And this idea of how about we build like the Fitbit, but for strength training was kind of the initial core of the idea that we had. And that was way back in 2018. And so that led to pivot after pivot after pivot, which we can talk about, but eventually that would lead to the Trainwell we know today.
Wow. Awesome. It's phenomenal. Yeah. So I guess when in that decision of you founding it, like what was, I guess, your core mission of that, of your founding Trainwell at the time? I can't speak to really at the time of how many training apps, but obviously today that you have so many different training platforms, and there's so many different coaching platforms, nutrition platforms, whatever it may be. So I guess what was the core mission of you finding Trainwell, and I guess what was the competitive edge that has led you to the success that it's at now?
Yeah. So, I'd like to say that I did a whole market analysis and picked the most optimal thing, but it really was much more simple than that, where the initial desire to build was one, a desire to build something that I knew that I wanted as a gym goer and that I would know that I would pay for and I would use. There was very little like market analysis, competitive analysis. Like we looked at some competitors, but we naively and maybe narcissistically thought, yeah, we're smart, we're good. Like if we want to do it, we're going to build the best one, we're going to win. We kind of just naively assumed that going in. We didn't get too spooked by all the different players. And then the second, I guess your second part of how we actually would differentiate in the story we told ourselves back then that would eventually come to fruition over the years was this idea of most fitness apps are really centered around the concept of what to do, right? They spit out a workout plan or they give you a collection of classes to do. But very, very few apps or services actually get you to do it and hold you accountable and drive your behavior. And that was the core gap that we didn't quite see it at the very, very beginning. But as we started iterating and talking to those early users, that just jumped off the page as everyone's over here trying to solve what. we're going to actually solve getting them to the gym in the first place. And once we kind of found that positioning unlock and that gap, the traction started falling into place and people started to kind of get it like, oh, this isn't a fitness app. And it's funny now that we've now finally signed in and announced this deal with Peloton, that in the very, very early days, I would always put up on a slide, like, you know, you've got Peloton, you've got Strava, like we're not their competitors. Like we could be a level above them. We could be prescribing their content. We could be ingesting their data and being the training engine. And probably a bunch of VCs at the time said, yeah, okay, good, whatever. You say, right. Like, yeah, they're going to crush you.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. It's awesome.
That's awesome. So my wife's like huge user of Peloton, has been for years. And obviously we allocate capital and invest money. And I just personally just bought, Peloton's gotten beat up bad in recent years, but I recently just personally bought Peloton, the equity, and it's been the best performer this year of the portfolio, which has been awesome. But you know, you mentioned that, you know, obviously you're the original founder, but you mentioned a co-founder and, you know, one of your best friends, you said, Gabe, you said, I think.
Yes.
Correct? So a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, you find sort of some, even if they started alone, gravitate to having a partner later. Talk me through that process to you of, you know, when you knew you needed a partner or wanted a partner and what that journey looked like.
Yeah. So just knowing myself and knowing how I like to work, it's very collaborative. It's very out in the open. And so I don't think I could have made it as a solo founder. And so every project I ever really had done seriously, I always had some kind of partner that I could lean on for, you know, both the existential crises at midnight, but also, you know, technical support and actually getting stuff built and done. So when it came time to sort of choose or pursue a partner for the business, Gabe was not nearly as far along in his own entrepreneurial journey and mindset that I was at the time. I think he was at MIT at the time, kind of thinking, oh, maybe I'll get a PhD, maybe I'll stay in school, maybe I'll go into industry. Definitely not, I'm going to found a startup. So I was that bad influence that kind of drug him out of his classes. You know, his parents were upset about that at first, but they came around in the long run and kind of drug him into the world of entrepreneurship. And as far as why I felt like he was such a good fit for this business, I'd say he was obviously the one who got me into fitness originally. So we had that shared story, that shared background and passion. And then from a technical and just raw intelligence and aptitude perspective, he was genuinely one of the smartest people I had ever met. You know, top of the class at MIT, doesn't get much better than that. And so I felt like, you know, I had a natural strength to go talk to investors and share the vision and articulate what we were trying to build. I was a good enough engineer, but I knew I needed someone who could really be that amazing sort of technical and operational cornerstone to the business behind me, so that when I was running around doing pitch competitions or talking to investors and raising funds, I could have someone really building the core of what would deliver value. So that was the balance in the early days. It was just basically me and him against the world. And it wasn't until almost 2 full years in that we really started bringing on anyone else or delegating any of the core tasks of the business.
Yeah. And that's usually how it starts is there's, in many cases, and in our case as well, you have 2 core individuals, and then people who could do it by themselves, I tip my hat to them, because it takes a ridiculous
Type of person.
insanely broad,
Like an Elon type guy.
Yeah, you look at Elon, you look at Zuck, you look at the guys who are at the highest of levels. Like, they have this incredible skill set to balance both. But in most cases, and in many people that we've met, it's usually 2 people to start, and then you're building a team around you.
Yep.
One of the things that I definitely want to touch on, because it's a very interesting process, especially in the tech space, is the raising of money and the raising of capital. And it's obviously arguably the most important thing, arguably more important, if not just as important as the product development, is how you can go out, tell your story, sell your story, and raise the funds to turn your product into something that becomes a reality. So talk a little bit about that process of kind of how you started, when you got to the point that you felt like, hey, we need to go out and start raising capital, and then obviously how it continued to progress.
Yeah, it's a great question. And like, one thing I'll say first, and I always say this to entrepreneurs I mentor, is it's very easy to put the target on fundraising and say, everything will work out if I can fundraise. I think the reality, at least in my experience, is fundraising will work out if everything else is good, right?
Right.
And you raise millions of dollars, you wake up the next morning and it's the same business with the same problems, with the same customers, with the same growth, right? And funding can accelerate all of that and solve certain problems, but I think now I recognize that just chasing the funding oftentimes is a distraction or an excuse to not solve some of the harder problems of like, do people really want to buy this and use it? So applying that to my own journey, I think in the early days, we were very fortunate to have a lot of support from the Carnegie Mellon ecosystem. That was a lot of key doors were opened there. We did some pitch competitions when we got on the order of like $100,000 from a few pitch competitions and accelerators through CMU. So that kind of gave us the ramen money to kind of do the first few months. Then the next era of funding was all angel investors. So I would reach out and get really mentorship from Carnegie Mellon alumni, MIT alumni, other successful founders in the fitness space. And they didn't like invest overnight, but over the course of months and sometimes years, I was able to build those relationships. And then when there became a need for funding or we had some sort of breakthrough that would justify funding, they would write in a 25K check or a 50K check, or I think the biggest angel was maybe 250K or something like that, right? And then finally, when we were hitting our first sort of inflection of real growth, millions of dollars of revenue, is finally when we were like, crap, like we need more capital on a different order of magnitude than what I can get by piecing together 25 and 50K checks. And so that's when we finally turned to like the traditional venture capitalist kind of model. And I was again, quickly connected from a lot of those angels in the Carnegie Mellon network to venture capitalists. And because of the growth we were experiencing at the time, especially that first round was relatively easy to pull together in terms of how funding rounds can be. And then later on, we would go on to raise about $20 million total from VCs and angels combined.
That's incredible.
With the whole VC route, so, my biggest challenge in business, so we've grown a ton through M&A, and raising capital has always been, when you're starting out as a company and you're young, you obviously don't have 30 years of financials to lean on. So to your point, it's the business and right. It's the business and what it's gonna be that you're selling to the lenders to, raise capital. And, we continue to go through different stages of different types of capital. In our space, it all leads to, sort of investment bankers. So when you were going through the whole VC stage, did you engage with a, banking partner? Did you handle all that on your own? How was that experience?
I'd say somewhere in the middle where, again, when we raised our first venture money, I was like 22, 23 years old. So I knew nothing. The only like experience I had was being an engineering intern. So I couldn't tell you what a gross margin was, let alone, get things up to the par that I think a lot of traditional investors would want. But for venture capitalists in particular, especially early stage tech investors, like you said, what they're investing in is the team, in the vision, in the market, and they have fortunately a very high level of understanding for the business is not going to be as mature as it maybe would be if you were going through more of a private equity style process where there's a lot of financial scrutiny and you're getting a multiple on your EBITDA and like that kind of thing. Like it's a totally different world to that. It's very much, yeah, this guy seems smart. I like his vibes. This is a good market. Like, yeah, this business is probably worth 10 million, right? And you're like, what? I remember like telling my dad, like, our business just got valued at $10 million. And he was like, you don't have any revenue. How is that possible? And I was like, that is a good question, but I'm not going to complain, right? But that's just the way of venture.
We had a guest on the show, Mark DeSantis, who's
so you probably
actually Bloomfield Robotics. One of the companies he I think came in as CEO as, right? Was right next door to us in the CMU Entrepreneurship Center.
That's the one he sold to Kubota. Yeah. We had him. He's very smart individual.
Yeah. He was explaining like that VC process, like when the valuation could be dangerous because like, if you raise on 10 million and it's really only worth 5, like it's great right now, but like, and you're just trying to spend it to get enough like proof of concept to justify the next raise. But if like at the next raise they're expecting it to now justify like a $20 million raise, And if you take like too much on the initial raise, you could screw yourself later because you're not generating enough momentum to just keep going. So I thought that whole world was super interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is I always tell founders very much similar to that. Like the second you take the first VC check, especially if you're spending money directly to grow, like you normally are with a marketing driven business, you're on a clock, right? Like you have to grow into the valuation that you just raised that and then some to justify the next round. And if you don't do that, your options close off very quickly, especially if your revenues aren't on par with the kind of scale that the valuation would apply, right? So we were relatively fortunate that we didn't raise at crazy high valuations, and our revenue was always kind of on par, at least order of magnitude wise, with the valuations we were getting, which kept optionality open for the business, and we never felt like we were super cornered in terms of, oh my goodness, like the only way out is to spend $100 million in marketing. Like, we were able to explore, more strategic options or lean into partnerships or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. So, and you touched on marketing and how important that is, especially in something that you've built and that you guys are building. So it sounds like, was that you driving the marketing efforts? Or did you bring in outside parties once you started to raise that capital to really go to the masses and start bringing in business?
Yeah, so we never, we've hired a few like larger consultancies over the years and tried different channels and experiments with them. But to be honest, like the biggest growth wins we've had came from people just on our own team. A lot of them are a similar background of like scrappy, younger, entrepreneurial kind of people, less so the seasoned marketing exec. At least for us, that was what was more successful in those early days. So basically after we hired the first trainer, the very next hire after that was my now COO, John, who came in and just tried a bunch of crazy marketing ideas. Like every channel you could possibly dream up, he tried. And one of the channels that worked incredibly well, kind of right out of the gate, was influencer marketing, specifically these like longer form testimonial style videos on YouTube. When the first one of those went live, we got, I don't know, maybe 50 new customers. And at the time that was like a huge deal, freaking out. We're like, oh my God, it's like thousands of revenue. Like, this is awesome. And that channel would go on to become one of our really, really big drivers of growth over the years. And with marketing, I generally tell people like, it's all about finding like that one channel that just really makes sense for your business and your product. And if your product can kind of play into the marketing directly, even better, right? And maybe for you guys, that's hosting a podcast with cool entrepreneurs on it, right? For us, that was these large, relatable YouTubers where we could tell the story of them using our product, and people would see that and say, oh, now I understand, like our product's kind of complicated, right? So they would understand like, oh, that's how it works. Oh, that's the value it delivers. Like, this seems awesome. And then a good video could drive, 1,000 new customers, and that would become pretty scalable.
Your company seems very interesting because it's its core, it's a tech company, right?
Yep.
It's all, all of that type of, coding and all of that creation. Did you already have that skill set, or did you have to find somebody that was a subject matter expert in those things?
Between Gabe and I, we both got, like, I got an engineering degree at Carnegie Mellon. Gabe was computer science and machine learning at MIT. So I definitely can't say like, we didn't know what we were doing technically, but we had never built an app before. We had never built a server before. We had never, deployed any of that and scaled anything before. And so despite having like some of the fundamental skills of like how to write code, which nowadays you don't even really need anymore, right? But back in my day, you needed to write some of the code yourself, right? Since we didn't know how to make an app, I remember I literally just YouTubed how to make iOS app. And there was like a Stanford lecture series that I just like no life watched that for, 2 weeks straight, basically. And on the other end of that, I was just dangerous enough to make a really crappy, unstable iOS app that was, again, just good enough to prove out the concept. And then once it was proven, then we could bring on a real iOS engineer, and then we could, and layer on like real people. Right. But I think like good enough was kind of my take on our technical ability. And Gabe is much stronger at the core, like technically and mathematically than I am. I was much more the scrappy, hacky, like build the proof of concept type guy. Yeah.
That's awesome. Just for like viewers and honestly us, I'd love to know like can you just do a broad overview explanation of your actual operating model within the application in terms of not as much on the back end, but essentially how the user is interfacing with the app, how and maybe even how it's continued to progress over time, maybe some future things that you have planned as well.
For sure. Yeah. I realized we kind of skipped straight from initial idea in the weeds financials. So to take a step back, the service is a one-on-one remote personal training service. And so clients come to us and they first fill out kind of a quiz that allows us to pair them with the best possible trainer match. And today we have hundreds of trainers full-time on our staff. And so we can, look through all their characteristics and their profiles and find the best ones for you. You'll pick a trainer, you'll schedule a time to do an onboarding call with them, which is typically a 45 to 1 hour call, remote like Zoom call. And then during that call, the trainer will learn all about your goals, the equipment you have, any injuries you have, limitations, schedule, etc. And they'll use all that to put together a personalized workout plan for you, which can include anything from very traditional strength training to running to, if you're with one of our partner experiences, Peloton classes, right? So we kind of pulled together a bunch of different dimensions of fitness into one plan. And then the key part is you sort of make a commitment to your trainer to actually show up and do that, which sounds very simple, but is where so much of the value comes from, where when you commit to another human being to do something, it just carries so much more weight than if you get a push notification from Duolingo saying you're about to lose your streak, go and do it. And it can help and work, and we have streaks too, right? But this idea of my trainer built this for me. I told my trainer I would show up. My trainer expects me to proactively communicate if I'm not going to show up. And that relationship is taken seriously. That drives a lot of behavioral change in people. And so that's where most of the value comes from. So people pay us, depending on what plan and generation of customer you're from, you'll pay between $100 and $150 a month for unlimited access to that trainer and as many workouts and chats and calls as you want.
I think that's pretty competitive.
Yeah.
So, I'm obviously just learning about your product for the first time. Last year, I did the half Ironman. So I hired hired a remote trainer, not through like a set, app or company. It's sort of like small business. And that daily communication, like without that, if let's just say I was just following some guide I found online, like I wouldn't have been able to finish the race. Like it was that like daily accountability. You talk about it all the time. You have a bunch of friends that you guys do that with, where just that daily accountability, like of not knowing that you're not going to let this person down is what got me through that training for sure.
No, I love that concept. And this is even switching gears, but this is just such a big part, because you mentioned the ability now where you don't even have to know code and you can write code, and how important, especially in a business like yours and in ours as well, the data component of how much data that you're gathering as you're interacting with all these thousands and hundreds of thousands of users. I guess, how are you thinking about using that data to continue to frame future development with your application?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we use data every hour of every day at this point to inform our decisions. Like when you're just starting out, obviously it's all just gut. It's all like based on that one customer you talk to. And as especially consumer companies evolve, almost every iteration and optimization of the product becomes increasingly data driven. And so, I think companies like Duolingo do like a masterclass of this, where they're constantly running hundreds of A/B tests within their app. And then they're, even if there's a 0.1% difference, they have enough users and enough data that they can get statistical significance on that and then roll out a feature to make the app just that much better. And so we don't quite have enough users to do that on 100 tests at once across, every little facet of the product, but almost every major feature we do is the result of a test where we explicitly say, this is the threshold for how good it needs to be. Here's the hypothesis. Here's how we're going to run it. Here's how we're going to measure it. And we're looking at everything from retention to how many workouts they're doing, to how consistent they're being, to how much they're messaging their trainer. So that's just a very core part of our day-to-day. Zooming out a bit, I think there's a vision to use this data on what is making people accountable, on which workouts and which programs are driving outcomes, that I think is going to become increasingly exciting as fitness becomes more and more healthcare associated, right? Like, fortunately today we're still kind of in a world where everyone knows that preventative care and fitness is super important, but the medical industry doesn't really recognize that formally, and the payers don't really pay for fitness, right? But as we get better and better at proving that fitness drives outcomes and understanding what specifically about fitness drives outcomes, I think that data becomes immensely valuable to, pitch covering a personal trainer to a United Healthcare or something like that, right? And so that's where I think the data becomes very high leverage to the business in the long run.
That's something we do for our employees. Like we reimburse all of our employees monthly up to a certain amount of fitness spend.
Yeah, employers are leading the charge, which is pretty like employers get it because they actually deal with the people every day. And they're like, yeah, like I want my people to work out. I want them to be fit. I want them to be energized, right?
Yeah.
I wish that carried a level up to the more aggregate payers, right? But we do have like a decent amount of smaller partnerships with employers, like probably like you guys, right? Where we can set them up with bulk training packages and make sure that whatever they're doing, whether it's the gym or some kind of class or whatever, that they're being accountable to it and that they're doing it in a very structured way.
I think it's starting to shift though. I think that with over the last 5 years, it has become, there used to be the subset group of people that worked out and it was just like, okay, there's those people that went to the gym, but now it's like cool to, you know what I mean? Like online, it's definitely a lot cooler. Like everyone wants to be a part of something. You have these new like group class oriented businesses that are really starting to do very well. You obviously see influencers that are pushing health, nutrition, all of these different holistic health ideas. And just me personally, I come from a background, my dad, my uncle, my cousin, all chiropractors. We came very holistic health background, family, fitness oriented family. So, but we used to be like everyone was like, oh, that's like kind of weird that you like care about your health.
Like they're crazy.
Yeah. But like now it's like, oh, like I probably should focus on my nutrition and focus on my exercise and like what my vitals are. So I think it is starting to shift. And I think we will get closer to that, to your point, where the healthcare companies will have to adapt away from right now. It's just, oh, you have an issue. We're going to like immediately medicate it. We're not going to talk about any of your lifestyle habits that you're doing that are most likely causing this issue. So I think that is interesting. And I think from your standpoint, there's a massive amounts of upside to penetrating that market.
The longevity boom has been like, that has become our biggest segment of users for sure. And it always surprises people to learn that like our best and largest group of users is women between the ages of generally 35 and 50 who are looking to get into strength training, oftentimes for the first time in their life, right? So despite me and Gabe coming from the gym bros wanting to optimize our workouts, like truly the need in the market is for people just doing the basics of strength training, being accountable to it, using it for longevity means, right? And that shift has been awesome to see. Yeah, like I personally feel like I've gone from being the kind of, lame guy at a given social setting to like, wow, that's really respectable, like, whatever. And I'm like, just who I am, man. But like, cool, I'm glad this is like cool now.
It's cool now, literally.
Yeah. I mean, something that's got to make you feel good too about your business is like, you're not only adding longevity to people's lives, but you're changing people's lives every day. Like, I'm sure you have crazy success photos and probably reviews like crazy, but at the end of the night, like when you lay your head down, it's not like you started a tobacco company or a vape company, like the sinful companies. Like every night you can lay your head down. I'm sure your customer acquisition, at least one a day, like there's someone else that you now like got a step further to change their life like every single day, which has to be super fulfilling for you.
It's I'm a very like purpose and mission driven entrepreneur. Like to your point earlier, like there's so many fitness apps and, obviously the public markets are not kind to fitness companies typically. And so it's definitely not an industry I'd ever recommend someone get into if they're just trying to maximize for earnings, or sell at a crazy valuation, right? It really is an industry, and it's so fun to work with these people day to day. That's made up of people who genuinely just really love fitness and love helping other people find that same thing in their life. And one very quick testimonial I'll share because it's so memorable to me is it was really the first like, wow, like I know I'm doing the right thing in the world moment. And this was probably about 6 or 7 months into having our actual training product out in the world. And I get this random email from a customer and random day in December. And basically the email said, I was diagnosed with cancer a year ago. I was told that I almost certainly wouldn't make it. But I was ready to fight. And that same time in my life, I found your service and I got paired with Nate, my trainer. And he supported me and encouraged me and made me do workouts and build my strength through this whole thing. And if it weren't for your service, I wouldn't be alive today.
That's great. That's
And
incredible.
I'm just like, holy crap. Like, let's just take a moment to be like, most people will never be able to feel what I just felt. And I knew at that moment, I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like whether it's, this company or another one that does a similar thing, right? It's like, this is awesome, right? Nothing could compete with that.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
incredible. And you mentioned like obviously how influential the interaction with the specific trainer was to that individual. And with your model, from how I understand it, obviously you have hundreds of these trainers and they're really the point of communication with your clients. So when you're sourcing these trainers, how do you manage quality control? How do you make sure that they're upholding the standard that you're trying to deliver out to the masses? Because and we know this very well, as you start that scaling process and you're putting other individuals that are actually servicing your clients on a day-to-day basis, the quality control gets way harder. So talk a little bit about that, about how you manage that and how you navigate that.
Yeah, that is such a crux to this business. And I think is where we've invested a disproportionate amount of time and energy in tech, really, compared to our competitors. Where, I mean, it starts with just acquiring the best possible core people. And the way we do that is we try to have as generous and appropriate of a job and compensation and benefit set as you would want for someone whose job it is to change lives and save lives every day. And unfortunately, as you guys may know, like in the personal training industry, almost every gym, almost every training job is a 1099 contractor position where you're normally in charge of hustling for your own clients day to day. It's very like, run your own business, but also we're taking 50% of your revenue because it's our gym. And it's just a really, and your working hours that basically is the inverse of when everyone else is working, right?
True,
and so it's just a really, really tough job, but such great people. And so we identified early on, like many of our competitors were going for this Uber-esque marketplace model where they just said, oh, that works for the gyms. Let's just make them 1099s. Like they'll kind of do it on the side. Like they'll hustle for their own people. We'll just be the software layer. Like we'll do that. And we, obviously a lot of our mentors and even investors said, yeah, that's super profitable. Like do that. Like that's awesome. It's scalable, whatever. And we were like, but the actual experience, both for the trainers and the clients, is just not that good, right? Like, how are we going to like win in the market when we have very little control over like, who's coming in, and we have very little control of the actual end user experience? And so we said, we're going to actually take a huge hit economically to employ these trainers as W-2 salaried employees from day zero, with, full benefits coverage, 401k plans, like the whole thing. And that alone allows us to attract organically, hundreds of trainers every month are looking for a job at Trainwell just because we treat them right, which is sad to say for the industry, right? On top of that, we have a very aggressive like vetting, interviewing, like we even put them into simulations with like sort of faux clients where they can demonstrate how they would communicate or handle certain situations, to make sure we have the best of the best. I think it's about 3% of trainers who apply end up actually being given an offer. Once they're in, then we have all kinds of tech-driven QA and automation systems to help them not only do their job faster and accurately the first time, but then also help them catch things that slip through the cracks. And obviously, people always say, oh, well, how can you not build an AI business? Like, you have such a human business. And I'm like, there's a lot more AI than you would think in this human business, because we use AI aggressively in that function where it's auditing, it's monitoring, it's summarizing client interactions to make sure that nothing can slip through the cracks, even when trainers are training a lot of clients. And then we have hundreds of trainers where it's impossible, even with really strong managers, to keep an eye on every single client.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Our business is very similar, where we focus 100%. Like we want all of our humans spending almost all of their time interacting with other humans. And like Nick has led the effort on automating every other aspect of our business. So like he's in the process right now of trying to build like an agent army that can maximize all of our behind the scenes
Yeah, I might have
operational
some questions
efforts.
for you after. Yes, we're
chat.
we're
on all of
in
that.
the mid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So I love that, like, it seems like we're aligned of you want your humans interacting with humans and everything else, like take all the rest of that off of their plate, which I think is in a world that's flooded with, you know, robots and AI run human interaction services. I think the more that you can put humans in front of humans, I think that's going to be a very competitive business long term against all the competitors. They're trying to just go the cheapest option and replace humans. Because I think we naturally, like, look what we're doing right now. We like humans naturally want to get together and interact with other humans. I think that's never going to change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a divisive stance, especially in the world of tech startups nowadays, right? Where, you know, again, even talking to a VC and saying, yeah, we're actually betting on human services being more valuable and more competitive, but, you know, we're not just going to take that and leave it. Like, we're going to make those human services more effective, more accurate, more personalized than they ever were before using AI. I think is generally what I believe will be the highest overall value delivery businesses. But that it's hard to get that balance right, as I'm sure you guys are learning as well, right? Like, if you over automate, you're sort of like, people say, why is there even a human here if you're going to over automate this or this, right? If you under automate, then the economics struggle, and maybe the humans feel stretched too thin, or like they start just making more mistakes organically because you're not automating enough, right? And so we have very strong sort of principles around automation, where we never will automate a communication or interface between the client and the trainer, because it is just so easy to violate that trust. You get one clearly AI put in message and it's like all over, right? And so we will help the trainers make workouts faster. We'll help them make changes more accurately. We'll help them catch mistakes and summarize context, but we will never cross that line of, yeah, the trainer's just going to be a chatbot, right? Because then I think you might as well just be a high margin chatbot play, right? Yeah.
And with how quickly just all of the different AI tools have continued to develop, the user, the customer, can usually also pick out when it is AI. And we saw that especially, and completely have like steered away from that with all client communication. You'll see all of these companies that are putting out financial information. You're like, they literally got that right from ChatGPT. It's very basic. It's high level. It's using certain verbiage too that, you know, like a human wouldn't use that verbiage. So we've taken a really strong stance on only producing organic content coming from our like high level experts, communicating with our clients, all of that. Because again, in an age where like people just kind of get lazy and they're like, oh, I want a newsletter, I'm just going to throw it into ChatGPT and then it's going to kick it out. Like, people can recognize that now. And I think it's going to continue to become more recognizable. So the better your organic interaction with your client base or your customer base can be, I think is going to be a massive competitive advantage to really any business. But one of the other questions I had was, market wise, I guess, are you serving pretty much the greater United States? Are you going into international markets? Kind of where are you guys at with that right now?
Yeah, today we're in most English speaking countries, at least. And we have some initiatives underway to staff up on Spanish speaking trainers in particular, since there's a lot of demand there. But yeah, we are international. I think about 80% of our business is still in the US, but decent business in Canada, decent business in Australia, decent business in UK. So that is definitely, there's a lot of untapped potential there. I think especially if we can hire trainers in the locales of some of these clients, where that will allow us to then adjust costs down to whatever is appropriate for that market, versus right now, all of our trainer base is US based, and then our business stretches outside of the US, which sometimes can make the service appear expensive, right? If you're in a, you know, Central European sort of market and economy, but we're charging higher end US prices, like, it's hard to get a lot of market share there, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to hire still amazing trainers, but at a cost basis that's more appropriate for a given country.
Seems like your newest initiative that I saw online was the Peloton launch. I want to go back to that. So if you just want to update us on what's going on with that and what does that mean for, the future of, really organic growth using another very established brand to help with that?
Yeah, so I'd say about a year ago, we started a big strategic initiative where we recognized that what we are best at and what we have really built over the years is this like scalable human operating system, right? And just like we were just describing, it's all of this nuance around hiring the right people, optimizing them, QAing them, right? And a lot of businesses are having a similar realization to what you said around we want to have a human in our product because that's going to be more differentiated than having an AI. But man, we don't want to figure out all the mess around scaling a human service
Right.
and doing all that. And so we're like, okay, like we're getting a lot of sort of inbound demand for what if you added a scalable, personalized human service to our product? Could you do that? And for years, we had gotten those kinds of inbounds and we had sort of, dismissed them or like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work. Like, I don't know if it's the juice is worth the squeeze. But as the kinds of players that were reaching out got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where you're getting companies on Peloton scale reaching out and you start to do the napkin math of, is this a better growth engine potentially than just direct to consumer? And we said, yeah, it's worth a shot at least. So Peloton was the first time we really went for it and built this deep integration. We built a new product essentially for them that integrates deeply into their class library and allows the trainers to prescribe specific classes and get all the data back from Peloton. And then they do all of the marketing essentially and bring us thousands of clients. And it's been a very synergistic and very exciting launch so far. I probably can't share too many details about
Yeah.
exactly how it's going, but I'll say it's going well enough that we're very excited about not only deepening that relationship, but exploring potential relationships with other similar brands in across the gambit of wellness, nutrition, sleep, and fitness, of course.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my other questions was we've talked a lot about the training side of things and how the trainers interact with the customers from whether it's strength training, cardio, whatever it may be, on the other aspects of health, which you touched on nutrition, sleep, potentially supplementation. Is that something that you're kind of going into? You already do? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah. So over the years, I think we've generally had the mindset of we need to earn the right to play in those other categories before we jump straight into them. Like a few times we started to dabble a bit more in nutrition or dabble a bit more in wellness. And it honestly didn't go that well, mostly because we were just trying to do so much so fast all at the same time. And I see that happen with a lot of brands way bigger than us too, where they'll say, we're going to be the everything wellness app now. And they kind of tack a bunch of pieces together. And you kind of get this like mediocre thing that still isn't compelling enough for people to switch away from the specialist products in each pillar. Right. And so now, or over the last few years, I've been much more, I think, calculated in where we want to move next. Nutrition is the obvious one. There's a lot of demand for nutrition. It goes so hand in hand with driving the kinds of outcomes that people want from a personal trainer. But we're taking a very sort of methodical and test-driven approach there. So I think we will have some exciting releases in nutrition over the rest of this year. But I don't expect it to be on the level of development as our fitness products for a little bit at least. But it is an important part, and likely through partnerships, we can sort of speed up that process and that development as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Awesome.
This was awesome. Everyone here is huge into fitness, so I know the guys in the studio are as well. So loved having you here.
Yeah. We're gonna hit the gym after this.
That's right. That's right. But truthfully, it was a pleasure getting to meet you and hear about your story and your amazing product. And to all of our listeners out there, if you're still following along with Nick and I after this long, I'm sure all of them are probably into fitness. So definitely go find Trainwell to really maximize all of your fitness goals. And until next time, stay disciplined. Thank you.